you guys ever see Moneyball with Brad Pitt? It's a baseball movie, but it's really a movie about life. Brad Pitt plays a guy named Billy Beane. He's the general manager of the Oakland Athletics. The general manager isn't the one on the field who tells people what to do. He's the one who works all the deals to fill out the roster and make the money work. And the Oakland A's are portrayed in this book as being in a total rut at this point in their history. They've been doing things the typical way, and they're portrayed as just accepting mediocrity. This is just what we're going to be. And then along comes Billy Beane, and he shakes everything up. He's passionate about deals and metrics and different ways to do things. And of course, that threatens the establishment, but ultimately he's portrayed as having a new outlook on things that is really a reformer's outlook, and he's intimidating to a lot of people. He's also kind of charming and endearing to a lot of people, but the results speak for themselves, and he brings about a revitalization, a renewal of the organization that carries over and ends up affecting all of baseball. Ezra is kind of like Billy Beane. He's a reformer. He's coming into a system that has stagnated. He is of the priestly lineage descended from Aaron, and the priests had gotten fat and sloppy over the years. They didn't do a great job. They didn't love the law. They didn't teach people about the law. And so Ezra is portrayed in the book of Ezra, in the book of Nehemiah, as being a reformer whose power to reform comes from leaning in to the really old ways, leaning into the law and loving the law and cherishing it and being that somewhat intimidating, reform-minded guy. Look, Ezra wasn't the guy to go back and do part one of the objective here, which was rebuild the physical temple. He's the guy who was positioned properly and built right to come and rebuild the people, objective 2 of this era. He had high regard for the law in the same way the psalmists sing about the beauties of the law, something we would think of as just being technical and maybe boring, drab, restricting. The artists of the Old Testament at times viewed as being something that was a lovely reflection of the character of God, and that it was a delight to meditate on the law of God, that reflecting on the law of God is reflecting on the character of God and the presence of God. They delighted in it, and Ezra seems like that kind of guy. Ezra 7:1, after these things, during the reign of Artaxerxes, so again, as we talked about yesterday, 57, 58, 60 years rounding up pass in this time, and we skip over an entire reign of a Persian king, an entire era of Persia, the son of Darius, Xerxes. That's the era of Esther and Mordecai. We just don't get that here. If you want to know about that, you got to go read the book of Esther. After these things, during the reign of Artaxerxes, king of Persia, Ezra, son of Sariah, the son of Azariah, the son of Hilkiah, the son of Shallum, the son of Zadok, the son of Ahitub, the son of Amariah, the son of Azariah, the son of Marioth, the son of Zerahiah, the son of Uzai, the son of Bukai, the son of Abishua, the son of Phinehas, the son of Eleazar, the son of Aaron, the chief priest. This Ezra came up from Babylon. Dang, that's like full-on genealogy. It's not Matthew 1, settle down, but as genealogies go around here, that's pretty good. Now, you're smart. What's he trying to do here? He's trying to establish that, one, like we see in the census over here at the beginning of the book of Ezra in Act 1 of the temple rebuild story, he's trying to show that he can demonstrate his lineage and that he has a claim to this work of God in the rebuilding of the temple and the rebuilding of the people, just like everybody else on the genealogy who is definitely in, as opposed to the people at the end of the genealogy we looked at in Ezra 2, who had questionable backgrounds, and it wasn't clear as to whether or not they were viewed as a part of the inheritance of God with this rebuild that was going to happen. So one, this genealogy is meant to point out that Ezra is definitely in. He is a real Jew who has real ownership of this thing. But two, it's clearly meant to demonstrate that he is descended not just from any Israelite, he's descended from Aaron. Now, from Aaron comes the line of the priests, and Ezra is claiming to be directly descended, and therefore maybe in some way wielding some of that authority. Now, this might ring a bell for you. Some of you are like, oh, well, I'm around church some, and from time to time I hear about how different churches do things in the modern world, and there are some churches that say, man, everybody's a priest. Anybody, because of what Jesus did on the cross and because of his resurrection. If you're a Christian, You have access to that throne of grace of God that you can approach with confidence. The curtain has been torn in two at Jesus' crucifixion, and access into the presence of God is now clearly granted. There will be many of you, or like myself, full disclosure, who would say priesthood of all believers. Every Christian is a priest with access to God. There will be others of you listening to this, or friends and family who you know of, who would say, no, the priesthood is a unique role even in the church, and much like Ezra is tracing his priestly lineage back through the custody of the people who came before him and handed it down to him, so all truly ordained ministers of the church today must also be able to track that back. There's a whole family tree of ordinations and authority being handed down through the generations of the leadership of the church that members of traditions like Orthodoxy and Western Catholicism would say goes all the way back to Jesus and the first disciples. I know some people get really bent out of shape about this kind of stuff. I think it's more interesting to see what people do with the Bible and church history, and just to speak frankly about how it's done differently. And when you see things like this in the Bible, well, you got to acknowledge it's going to pop for certain types of followers of God, certain types of Christians today. And it's going to read a little bit differently to people who see this differently. So there you have it. In this case, in the Old Testament, before the time of Jesus, we can all agree at least that this was a very big deal for Ezra to be able to say, I have this credibility and I am a legitimate priest descended from the right people, and I was taken up into captivity just like everybody else. So he has lived through the suffering, and he's a part of this line of priests. It goes on, verse 6. He was a teacher well-versed in the law of Moses. Okay, wait a minute now, though. Okay, he was a teacher. So who's writing this? Is this Ezra talking about himself in the third person? It might be. That isn't crazy. It's not out of the question. Even, I think, very humble people talk about themselves in the third person under certain circumstances, even today. I know somebody who I care about very much who recently wrote a book, and he wrote the author's description on the back. Well, in the author's description, he didn't write, I do this, I do that, I went here, I went there. It's all so-and-so went to this school and did this thing and lives here and does these things. And it reads completely normally, and if anybody looked at that and was like, I wonder if that guy wrote it, they wouldn't think that that was weird that he wrote it, but they also might look at it and say, oh, I bet a publicist or somebody wrote that up. Here, I don't know who's saying this, but just because third-person pronouns are being used here, I mean, it doesn't preclude this from being written by Ezra himself. So it goes on. He was a teacher well-versed in the law of Moses, which the Lord, the God of Israel, had given. You see the way the language there kind of sounds like what I was talking about earlier on with the way the psalmists viewed it, that meditating on the law of the Lord was this rich, nourishing, emotional, beautiful, connective, transcendent activity, not some meticulous law school, dot your I's, cross your T's kind of tedium. And so it looks like Ezra has this same view. He sees the law as a triumph, as something wonderful. And so we've already seen a couple of claims to authority on the part of Ezra here. One is his lineage. Two, he's well-versed in the law. He's really good at it. And I think, if anything, whoever's writing this is underselling it a little bit. I mean, apparently he's the best at it because nobody else is stepping into this role. And he's the one who later on is going to get up front and talk about the law of God in front of everybody. I would assume if there was somebody better at it, they would get up and talk about the thing. So that's two claims to authority. Do we have time still for a third? Yeah, we do, and then we better wrap it up. It goes on. The king had granted him everything he asked, for the hand of the Lord his God was on him. See, that's actually two more claims to authority, isn't it? He had the favor of the king. Again, that's Artaxerxes at this time. I think it's possible that Ezra's career spanned back into the age of Xerxes, and that he received some of the good favor that had been earned by Mordecai and Esther during the reign of Xerxes, but maybe not. I mean, who can say for sure? Whatever the case, Artaxerxes likes him. And also, well, God likes him, for the hand of the Lord, his God, was on him. So in the same way that Billy Beane set out to be a reformer whose love of baseball and the core metrics of baseball would revitalize a once proud franchise, So as we get to know the resume of Ezra the priest, we get the impression that he is going to tap into his deep love of the old ways of the law of God to bring about reform and revitalize the once proud people of God back in Jerusalem. I think that worked, right? Did that work? I don't know. Sometimes it's too much. I can't tell if it's too much. I never know. Thanks for hanging out with me. I'm Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour Podcast. Let's do this again soon.